It all started when Anna walked into the living room and said, "I'm in remission." The words hung in the air for a moment, and I wasn't sure how to respond. Before I could say anything, she added, most people would have thrown a party or something. A surprise recovery party would have been nice. I just stared at her. A party? After everything? That was the last thing on my mind. For years, Anna had been battling what I thought was a terminal illness. I had been there through it all. Doctor's appointments, treatments, the sleepless nights. I'd carried the weight of everything, managing our finances, taking care of the house, and putting my own career on hold. And now, she was upset because I didn't plan a celebration. I didn't even know how to process that. Looking back, I can't believe how long this went on. For years, Anna had convinced me she was seriously ill. She never really explained the specifics, and I never pressed for them. She said the condition was rare, complicated, and required a lot of different treatments, chemotherapy, radiation, even surgeries. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife, and I loved her. I couldn't imagine anyone lying about something like that. I remember the early days when she'd come home from supposed doctor visits, looking exhausted. She would tell me the treatments were taking a toll on her, and I'd believe her. She showed me medications, explained how some of them made her nauseous and others made her tired all the time. The house quickly became quieter as I tiptoed around, trying to give her peace and quiet to rest. Over time, the illness took over our lives. I declined a few promotions at work because I didn't want to be away from home too much. We stopped visiting friends and family because Anna said she didn't have the energy for socializing. Even the holidays changed. Christmases and birthdays became muted affairs, with Anna sitting quietly in the corner, bundled in blankets, while people tiptoed around her, offering her sympathy. At first, our families were supportive. They sent gifts, offered help, and regularly called to check in. But after a while, things started to shift. My parents especially seemed to grow distant. They stopped asking about Anna's treatments, and their visits became less frequent. I chalked it up to them being busy, but now I wonder if they had suspicions all along. There were moments, small, fleeting moments, when things didn't quite add up. Like the time Anna had a doctor's appointment, and she was back home in less than an hour. She told me the doctor had just given her a quick checkup and sent her home. Then there was the time we ran into an old friend at the grocery store, and she seemed perfectly fine, chatting and laughing, when just an hour earlier, she had said she was too tired to leave the house. I remember thinking it was strange, but I never pushed her on it. I felt guilty even questioning her. What kind of husband doubts his wife when she's supposedly fighting for her life? Our life together slowly became more about her illness than anything else. On our anniversary, I had planned a small dinner at home, and I remember Anna lying on the couch, sighing dramatically, saying she felt too weak to eat. I sat there, picking at my food, trying not to let the disappointment show. It wasn't about the meal, it was about the fact that I had lost my partner to this illness, or so I thought. Her friends drifted away too. At first they would call or text, checking in, offering to help, but after a few years they stopped reaching out. I couldn't blame them. I had become distant myself, focused solely on Anna and her needs. Every time someone invited us out, I'd politely decline, explaining that Anna wasn't well enough to join. Eventually, the invitations stopped coming. The day everything started to unravel was an ordinary one. Anna was out for a walk, something she had taken up recently, saying it was part of her recovery process. I was organizing some paperwork when I came across a stack of medical bills. They weren't addressed to any specific hospital, and there was no official letterhead, just vague statements of charges. That's when the doubt I had pushed down for so long started to bubble up again. I spent the next few hours combing through our records, trying to find anything that would confirm what Anna had been telling me for years. But the more I looked, the more confused I became. There were no detailed medical records, no official diagnoses. The doctor's names she had mentioned weren't anywhere in our files. In fact, there wasn't a single document that confirmed she had ever received treatment for anything. I remember sitting there, staring at the papers, feeling like my world was spinning. Could it be possible that Anna had been lying this whole time? It didn't seem real, but at the same time, it explained so much. The quick doctor's appointments, the vague explanations, the strange looks from family and friends. But how could I even begin to confront her about this? That night, she came home from her walk, looking as cheerful as ever, talking about how she was feeling stronger every day. I barely heard her. My mind was racing with all the questions I wanted to ask but couldn't bring myself to voice. Instead, I just nodded along, pretending everything was fine. The next day, I started searching for answers. I called a few of the hospitals where Anna had supposedly received treatment, but they had no records of her, not even a single visit. I went through our bank statements and credit card bills, but there were no charges for any medical expenses. Nothing added up. And yet, despite all the evidence staring me in the face, I still couldn't fully believe it. Who would lie about something like that? How could she have kept this up for years? I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more proof, more time to figure out what was really going on. Now, I'm left wondering, has anyone else been through something like this? Something so completely confusing, where everything you thought you knew turns out to be a lie? Because right now I don't know how I'm going to face her with this, but I know I have to. I knew I couldn't avoid the confrontation forever. After finding nothing in the bank statements, no records from any hospitals, and no sign that Anna had ever received any of the treatments she claimed, I realized I had to confront her directly. It wasn't something I could just brush aside anymore. I needed answers. One evening, after dinner, I decided it was time. I had rehearsed the conversation in my head 100 times, but the moment I sat her down in the living room, the air felt thick with tension. I tried to keep my tone calm as I brought up the missing documents, telling her I had been looking for some paperwork for insurance purposes and couldn't find any medical records. The second the words left my mouth, I saw a change in her. Her posture stiffened and her expression darkened. Anna didn't hesitate to go on the defensive. "What? Are you accusing me of lying?" she asked, her voice sharp. I wasn't expecting the immediate pushback, and it threw me off. I tried to keep my tone steady, explaining that I was just confused and needed clarification, but she wasn't having it. Before I could say much more, she turned the situation around. "You're unbelievable," she snapped, crossing her arms. "After everything I've been through, this is how you treat me. I fought so hard, and instead of supporting me, you're questioning me." Her words came out fast, almost rehearsed, as if she had anticipated this moment and was ready with a counterattack. I stayed quiet, watching her as she ranted about how ungrateful I was. She talked about how she had suffered through years of treatments, how she had endured so much pain, and now that she was finally in remission, I was choosing to focus on the wrong things. According to her, I was being selfish, more concerned about paperwork than the fact that she had supposedly miraculously recovered. It was surreal. She was flipping the entire situation around on me, making it sound like I was the one being unreasonable. I couldn't get a word in as she continued, her voice growing more emotional, almost desperate. She painted herself as the victim again, accusing me of being controlling and unsupportive. She even said something about how I was always trying to undermine her, how I didn't trust her from the start. The whole thing was bizarre. It wasn't just that she was defending herself. It was how far she was willing to go to make me doubt my own memory, my own understanding of the situation. She started throwing in these strange explanations, saying her illness had been something too complex for me to understand. According to her, the treatments she underwent were experimental and didn't leave a paper trail. I knew none of it made sense, but the way she spoke, so certain, so confident, made me hesitate for a second. Was I missing something? It didn't take long for the argument to escalate. She started to lose her composure, accusing me of not caring about her well-being. She claimed that I had never really believed in her illness and that I was the one trying to gaslight her. It was like she had prepared for this exact moment and had a dozen excuses ready. She even brought up how brave she was to have survived this mystery illness and how I was too cold-hearted to appreciate that. But as the argument went on, it became clearer and clearer to me that this was all part of her game. Every time I pressed for details, like asking why the hospitals had no records of her treatments, she would shift the conversation, bringing up something unrelated or accusing me of being controlling again. It was exhausting. At one point, I decided I needed an outside perspective. I called my parents, who had been somewhat distant since Anna's supposed illness began. When I explained the situation, they were surprisingly calm. My mom especially admitted that she had always felt something was off. She had never voiced her doubts because she didn't want to cause any tension between us, but she had noticed inconsistencies over the years. My dad said he had questioned why we never saw real documentation or why Anna never let anyone come with her to the hospital. Hearing them confirm what I had been feeling for so long was a strange mix of relief and anger. It wasn't just my family either. I reached out to a few of our friends who had drifted away over the years. Slowly, they started to open up, admitting that they had always felt uncomfortable around Anna, especially when she'd talk about her illness. No one had ever confronted me directly about it, but now that I was asking, the stories poured out. They all had doubts but didn't want to seem insensitive or risk damaging our friendship. Armed with these confirmations, I decided to dig deeper. I called every hospital Anna had mentioned over the years, and every single one of them came back with the same response. They had no record of her as a patient, not even for a routine checkup, let alone major treatments. I checked our credit card statements again and realized there were no medical bills, none. Every time I had assumed she was at a doctor's appointment, she must have been somewhere else entirely. It all became so clear, but at the same time, it was so hard to accept. She had lied about everything. And yet, even knowing that, I wasn't ready for the next discovery. One evening, while Anna was out of the house, I went into the small storage space in our garage where she kept her personal files. I don't know what I was expecting to find, but what I discovered made my stomach turn. A neat stack of medical documents sat in a folder, all of them fake. There were letters from doctors that looked official at first glance, but after reading through them, it was obvious they weren't real. Some of them didn't even have proper signatures, and others had the names of hospitals that didn't exist. My hands shook as I went through the papers, realizing just how far she had gone to construct this lie. This was beyond exaggerating symptoms. She had created an entire fake medical history to manipulate me and everyone around us. I didn't confront her right away. I needed time to process everything, to figure out what my next move would be. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Anna had been deceiving me for years, and I had the proof in my hands. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but I knew this was far from over. After I found the stack of fake medical documents in our garage, everything started to fall apart. My world was unraveling faster than I could process. Every memory, every decision I'd made over the past few years felt tainted by Anna's lies. I couldn't look at her the same way, but I didn't confront her right away. I wasn't sure how to handle it yet. Instead, I started piecing together everything I'd missed, every red flag I had ignored, every strange behavior I had brushed off. There were so many moments that, in hindsight, should have raised alarms. I remembered the day Anna had come home from a doctor's appointment where she claimed she had undergone some intense treatment, but then a couple of hours later, she was out shopping, seemingly full of energy. I had thought it was just a good day for her, one of those rare moments where she felt better despite the illness. Now, it was clear that she had been playing a part the whole time. The lies didn't stop at her treatments either. Anna had crafted an entire narrative around her condition, telling friends and family how hard it was for her, how the treatments were experimental and expensive, and how much pain she was in. It was all a manipulation, and I had been blind to it for so long. After a few days of going through the fake documents and replaying every suspicious moment in my head, I decided to reach out to a lawyer friend. I needed to know what my options were legally, but more than that, I needed advice on how to get the full truth. My friend didn't hesitate to suggest hiring a private investigator. "You don't know how deep this goes," he told me, and he was right. I had only scratched the surface of Anna's lies, and I wasn't sure if I was prepared for what I would find next. Meanwhile, Anna continued to act like everything was normal. She even started planning a recovery party, going on about how it was supposed to be a celebration of her miraculous recovery, the party she was upset I hadn't thrown for her. I played along, not wanting to tip her off that I knew the truth. Every time she brought up the party, though, my suspicion grew. How could she be this bold, this confident in her lies, while knowing that I might find out at any moment? It was like she believed her own story at this point. I contacted the private investigator later that week. We had a long conversation about what I suspected, and he immediately got to work. It didn't take him long to start uncovering the truth. The first thing he found out was that, during the periods when Anna had claimed to be bedridden or undergoing intense treatments, she hadn't been anywhere near a hospital. In fact, she had been living a completely different life, meeting up with friends, going out to restaurants, and even traveling to nearby cities. I remember the first report the PI sent me. There were pictures of Anna laughing with friends, eating at a cafe, looking healthier than she ever did at home. She had been traveling while telling me she was undergoing chemotherapy. It was like seeing a stranger in those photos, someone I didn't recognize at all. I couldn't believe she had been able to pull this off for so long. How had I missed all of this? The more the pie uncovered, the worse it got. Anna had been visiting people I had never heard of, staying overnight in different cities under the guise of being in the hospital. It wasn't just a small deception anymore. It was a whole other life she was living. The lies were so deep, and I realized I had no idea who Anna really was anymore. As I continued working with the PI, I noticed a shift in Anna's behavior. She became colder, more distant, like she was sensing that something was wrong. She wasn't as affectionate or talkative as she used to be, and there was a defensive edge to her tone when we spoke. I didn't push her, but the tension between us was growing. My family, who had been distant for so long, started to pull back even more. They didn't say much, but I could tell they were suspicious too. They had always had their doubts about Anna's illness, and now that the truth was slowly coming to light, they were keeping their distance. The tension in our home was almost unbearable. Anna continued to talk about her recovery, acting as if everything was fine, but I could see the cracks in her story growing wider. She would make excuses to leave the house for hours at a time, claiming she was seeing friends to celebrate her health. But I knew she was hiding something. The PI continued to follow her and sent me more reports, each one more damning than the last. She wasn't just visiting friends. She was spending entire weekends out of town, staying with people I had never heard of. Then, one day, Anna simply disappeared. She left the house in the morning, saying she was going to run some errands, but she didn't come home that night, or the next day. For an entire week, I had no idea where she was. She wasn't answering her phone, and none of her friends seemed to know where she had gone. I was in limbo, not knowing what to do or where to turn. The PI eventually tracked her down. She was in another state, staying with someone I'd never heard of before, a friend she had never mentioned. I didn't know what to think. Had she run away because she knew I was close to uncovering everything? Was she planning some new deception? The more I thought about it, the less I understood. It was like trying to untangle a knot that kept tightening the more I pulled. At this point, I knew I had to confront her with everything. The lies had gone too far, and I had the proof in my hands, but I couldn't predict how she would react. I wasn't even sure if she would come home or if I'd have to track her down myself. All I knew was that this wasn't over. Not yet. And now I was prepared for whatever came next. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. After the private investigator found Anna in another state, staying with someone I had never heard of, it was clear that the lies had spun completely out of control. I had all the evidence, the fake medical records, the photos of her living a double life while I thought she was bedridden, the credit card statements showing no trace of the treatments she claimed to have undergone. It was time to confront her. A few days after she returned, I waited until we were both home alone. The tension in the air had been unbearable since her disappearance, and I could tell she knew something was coming. She was distant, avoiding eye contact, and keeping herself busy with meaningless tasks around the house. I let her go on for a while, watching her from the corner of my eye as I organized the papers in front of me, the evidence that would unravel everything. I started by asking her about the week she had been gone. She hesitated, giving me some vague excuse about needing time away to clear her mind, but it was clear she wasn't being honest. That's when I laid out the first piece of evidence. The photos of her out with friends during the time she was supposed to be undergoing treatment. I watched her face as she glanced at the pictures, and for the first time I saw her crack. She froze, her eyes wide, trying to come up with something to say, but the words didn't come. When she didn't respond, I continued. I pulled out the fake medical documents I had found in the garage and placed them on the table between us. I didn't need to explain what they were, she knew. I waited for her to deny it, to spin another web of lies, but instead she just stood there, staring at the papers. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was shaky. She tried to downplay it at first, saying that the illness was real but complicated, that the treatments were experimental, and the records had been misplaced. But as I laid out the rest of the evidence, the hospital confirmations that she had never been a patient, the photos of her out and about during her supposed treatments, she couldn't keep up the act any longer. Anna broke down. She admitted it. The whole thing had been a lie. She had never been sick. It started small, she explained, a way to get out of certain responsibilities, work, social events, obligations she didn't want to deal with. But once she saw how much sympathy it got her, how people rallied around her, how I had given up everything to take care of her, she couldn't stop. The lie grew bigger, snowballing until she didn't know how to backtrack without losing everything. She told me she was afraid that if I knew the truth, I would leave her, that people would see her differently, that she would lose the attention and care that had become her entire life. As she confessed, I sat there, not saying a word. Instead of feeling anger or betrayal, I found myself questioning every single moment of our relationship. Was anything real? Had she ever loved me? Or was that part of the act too? I didn't let those thoughts linger for long, though. This wasn't the time to focus on my feelings. It was time to face the facts of what had happened. I went over specific moments in our life together, recounting how everything suddenly felt like a lie. The anniversaries where she played the victim, the birthdays she spent in bed claiming she was too weak to celebrate, the holidays where our families tiptoed around her illness. Every memory was now tainted, and I could barely recognize the person I had married. It was like our entire relationship had been built on a foundation of deceit. Anna didn't offer much in the way of justification, but when she did, it was infuriating. She tried to downplay the deception, suggesting that everyone lies to some extent, and that she was just doing what she needed to survive. She even attempted to twist it into something relatable, as if pretending to have a terminal illness was just another form of escapism. But it wasn't just that. She was trying to manipulate me into staying, playing the victim once again. She cried, telling me she still loved me, that she was sorry, that she didn't mean for things to go this far. But I had heard it all before. The tears, the apologies, the promises to change, it was all part of the same pattern. I wasn't falling for it this time. Instead of responding to her pleas, I calmly stood up, gathered the documents, and left the room. I didn't need to say anything more. I had already made my decision. The next day, I quietly started making arrangements. I consulted with a divorce lawyer, laying out the evidence and explaining the situation. The lawyer was sympathetic but direct. This wasn't going to be a clean break, especially with the level of deceit involved. Financially, it was going to be complicated, but I was more focused on getting out of the marriage than on anything else. As I began the process, I couldn't help but feel like there was still something Anna wasn't telling me. Her breakdown had felt genuine, but at the same time, there was a coldness in her eyes when she talked about the lies, like she was still holding something back. The PI had uncovered so much, but there were still gaps: people she had visited, trips she had taken. I had a nagging feeling that there was more to her deception than what she had admitted. Even though I was preparing to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that Anna was hiding something bigger, something that hadn't come to light yet. As I moved forward with the divorce, I knew I had to stay vigilant. The lies were out in the open now, but I wasn't sure if the full truth had been revealed. Whatever was left, I was ready for it. I thought things would settle down after I filed for divorce. I had already moved out of the house temporarily, staying with a friend while the paperwork was being processed. I had distanced myself from Anna as much as possible, communicating only through the lawyer. It seemed like the worst was over, and I could start putting my life back together. But of course, Anna wasn't done. One afternoon, about a week after I'd officially filed for divorce, I was at work when my phone started blowing up with messages from my coworkers. Something was happening in the lobby, and it didn't take long for me to realize what, or rather who it was. Anna had shown up at my workplace, and she wasn't being subtle about it. I stayed at my desk for a moment, hoping the situation would diffuse on its own. But then, my boss came in, looking concerned. She's saying you're abandoning her, he asked, clearly confused. I could feel the tension rising in my chest. I had tried to keep my personal life separate from work, but now it was bleeding into everything. I made my way downstairs, and sure enough, there she was, Anna, standing in the middle of the lobby, surrounded by a small crowd of my coworkers, putting on a performance like I had never seen before. She was crying, telling everyone who would listen that I had left her in her time of need, that after she had fought so hard to beat her illness, I had abandoned her. The audacity of it all left me momentarily stunned. Anna was painting herself as the victim again, just like she had done for years. I could see the sympathetic looks on the faces of my coworkers, most of whom didn't know the full story. They had no idea about the lies, the manipulation, the fake illness. All they saw was a woman who seemed heartbroken and desperate. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her narrative take hold, especially not in front of the people I worked with every day. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, addressing the crowd first. I calmly explained that this was a private matter, that Anna was not telling the truth, and that I would deal with it outside. The looks of sympathy began to shift into confusion as they saw how composed I was in contrast to Anna's theatrics. Once we were outside, I didn't waste time. I laid it all out for her. I told her that this was it, her last attempt to manipulate me, and it wasn't going to work. I had the evidence, I had the truth, and I wasn't going to be pushed around by her lies any longer. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just spoke clearly, letting her know that whatever game she was playing was over. For the first time, I think she realized she had lost control of the situation. The tears stopped, and the defiance that had been fueling her for so long seemed to drain away. She tried one last time to pull me back in, talking about how we could fix things, how she could explain everything, how she still loved me. But it didn't matter anymore. There was nothing left to fix. The final confrontation was short. I walked away, leaving her standing there on the sidewalk. No more audience to perform for, no more lies to hide behind. I felt a strange sense of closure as I got back to work, knowing that this was the last time I would let her control any part of my life. From that point forward, things moved quickly. The divorce proceedings continued without much more drama, at least on the legal side of things. My lawyer handled most of the details, and I focused on repairing the damage Anna's lies had caused to my relationships with family and friends. It wasn't easy. Some people had believed her story for so long that it was hard for them to reconcile the truth with what they thought they knew. I had to have some difficult conversations, explaining everything that had happened and showing the evidence I had gathered. Slowly, people started to come around. Some were angry with Anna for deceiving them, but others just seemed relieved that the truth was finally out. As for Anna, she faded from my life as quickly as she had appeared in the lobby that day. After the divorce was finalized, she moved away. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had disappeared from social media entirely, wiping out any trace of her online presence. It was like she had vanished. Part of me wondered if she had found someone else to manipulate, another life to slip into, but I didn't care enough to find out. The strange thing is, even after all the lies were uncovered, there's still a part of me that feels like I don't know the full story. There were so many gaps in her life, people she visited, places she went, stories she told that never quite made sense. I have no idea how far her deception truly went, and I'm not sure I ever will, but I've come to accept that. Some things don't need to be fully understood to be left behind. In the end, I'm just grateful that I'm out of the situation. My life isn't perfect, and I'm still dealing with the aftermath of everything that happened, but at least now I have control again. I'm working on rebuilding trust with the people who matter, and slowly, things are starting to feel normal again. There's still a lingering question in the back of my mind though. Was there more to her lies than I uncovered? Did she have a bigger plan? Or was it all just a tangled web that spiraled out of control? I may never know the answer, but I'm okay with that. Anna's gone now, and with her, the chaos she brought into my life. The story is over, but the lessons I learned will stay with me forever.